You have lived a life you cannot access. There are years of you, years of experience, of feeling, of learning, of being, that are simply gone. Not faded, not blurry, gone. You took your first steps somewhere. You heard your name for the first time and turned toward it. You felt fear and joy and hunger and comfort hundreds of times before you ever had a word for any of them, and you remember none of it. This isn't amnesia. It isn't damage. Every human being on Earth shares this exact blind spot, and the explanation for why it exists is strange enough that once you hear it, you'll find yourself wondering something deeply uncomfortable. Not just why those memories disappeared, but what it means that the person who made them was, in some measurable way, not quite you. This phenomenon has a name. Psychologists call it childhood amnesia, and the closer you look at it, the less it resembles forgetting. It resembles something else entirely. Let's start with what most people assume. The common instinct is that early memories simply fade over time, that 3-year-old experiences are just too old to survive. But this explanation falls apart immediately when you test it, because memory in general does not work that way. You can remember a conversation from 15 years ago. You can remember the smell of a specific place you visited once as a teenager. Time alone does not erase memory, so why does it erase everything before age 3? The second assumption is that babies and toddlers simply aren't forming memories at all. That nothing is being recorded, so there's nothing to lose. But this is also wrong, and demonstrably so. Infants as young as 6 months can recognize a face they've seen before. Toddlers remember routines, recognize voices, form clear preferences and aversions based on past experience. The memory system is running. It is absolutely recording. So the memories were made. And then they vanished, which means something is actively happening to them. And that something turns out to be one of the most fascinating and unsettling stories in all of neuroscience. Deep inside your brain, there is a structure called the hippocampus. It is the architect of autobiographical memory. The kind of memory that says not just what happened, but that it happened to you at a specific time, in a specific place. The kind of memory that constructs the story of your life. In the first years of life, the hippocampus is profoundly immature. The neurons are there, but the connections between them. The dense, organized web of synaptic links that allows experiences to be encoded as coherent, retrievable narratives, that web is still being built. And it isn't built quickly. It develops gradually across the first several years of childhood, and it isn't meaningfully complete until somewhere around age 3 or 4. So early experiences are being processed. They are influencing behavior, shaping responses, leaving traces. But they are not being consolidated into the kind of structured, storied memory that your adult brain can later retrieve. They are written in a format your future self will never be able to read. But here is where the story deepens. Because the hippocampus alone doesn't explain everything. There is a second factor that researchers have increasingly focused on, and it has to do not with brain structure, but with something more abstract, something that might surprise you. Language. Specifically, the self-referential use of language. The ability to say the word I and mean it. To construct a narrative in which you are the central character. Studies across multiple cultures and languages have found something striking. The age at which people's earliest memories begin correlates directly with the age at which children in that culture develop a strong sense of autobiographical self. And that development is deeply tied to language acquisition. Children who are raised in environments where parents frequently discuss the past with them. Do you remember when we went to the park and you fell? Develop earlier and richer early memories than children raised in cultures where this kind of personal narrative conversation is less common. What this tells us is that memory, at least the kind we can consciously access, is not just a recording. It is a story. And to store an experience as a retrievable memory, you need the narrative tools to frame it. A sense of self stable enough to be the subject of the story, and language rich enough to give it structure. Before roughly age 2.5 to 3, Most children do not have this. They have experience, they have feeling, they have preference and recognition and response, but they do not yet have a stable I at the center of it all. And without that I, the experience has nowhere to attach. It drifts. It dissolves. Now here is the part that stays with you. If your earliest memories required a self to form, if the you that could store experience into retrievable narrative didn't fully exist yet before age 3, then who was living those years? There was a body. There was a nervous system registering sensation. There was a face learning to read other faces. A brain soaking up language at a rate it will never match again. A person feeling things with an intensity that adults rarely access. But there was not yet the continuous, self-aware narrator that you experience yourself as being right now. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent much of his career on a version of this question. What makes you the same person across time? And his conclusion was unsettling in the best way. Personal identity, he argued, is not a fixed thing. It is a construct. A story we tell, with memory as the thread. And if that's true, then the child who lived your first 3 years wasn't a different person exactly. But they weren't fully you either. They were a prior self, pre-reflective and unnarrated, living entirely in the present tense, leaving no forwarding address. You are, in a very real sense, the sequel to someone you will never remember being. There is one more layer to this, and it is the one that tends to unsettle people the most. The memories you do have from early childhood, the ones that feel vivid and specific. The birthday party, the house you grew up in, the face of a grandparent, a significant portion of them are probably not real. Not in the way you think they are. Research on childhood memory has consistently found that a large number of our earliest memories are actually reconstructions. Confabulations built from photographs we've seen, stories we've been told, emotional impressions that our adult brain later assembled into a scene. We have taken fragments, a feeling, a name, an image on a photo, and our brain, which abhors a gap, has filled in the rest. Seamlessly, convincingly, without flagging any of it as invented. In one study, researchers successfully implanted entirely false childhood memories in a significant percentage of adult participants simply by describing a fictitious event to them in detail and asking them to think about it. Within weeks, many participants not only believed the event had happened, they had added their own sensory details to it. They remembered things about the false memory that the researchers had never mentioned. This is not a flaw in unusual people. This is the standard operating procedure of human memory. Your brain is not an archive, it is a storyteller, and storytellers, when they hit a gap in the record, do not leave silence, they invent. So here is where that leaves you. The earliest years of your life are gone. Not because time erased them, but because the self that could have held them didn't exist yet. The memories you think you have from that period are largely reconstructions, assembled after the fact from secondhand materials. And the person who actually lived those years, who felt everything you felt before you had words for feeling, is someone you can infer but never meet. And that person is still shaping you. The fears you can't explain, the comfort you find in certain sounds or smells or textures, the attachments that formed before you had language to describe them. That early self left no memories, but it left marks. It wired things into you that your conscious mind has never had access to and never will. You didn't lose your childhood. It's still running underneath everything. You just lost the ability to see it.